Everybody, Diana here at Sew Uncommon. Welcome in where we use Build a Quilt here at Sew Uncommon to create beautiful quilts with our embroidery machine. We love having you here, and today is Quilt Lab. Every Sunday we have Quilt Lab. This month we're working on the 5440 or Fight block and two of its variations, and I'll share those with you in just a little bit. But we're so thrilled to have you all with us today. Welcome to all of our new subscribers. Gosh, there's so many of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and I'll share that again at the end with you all. If you are new and want to subscribe to the channel, we'd love to have you. So as I said, this is Quilt Lab, and we've been working on this month's block, 5440 or Fight, and that's this block right here. This is the primary block. Pretty simple block to do. The main new piece we learned how to do this month is this, what we're calling the point block, okay? So very simple to do, and when you get your pattern set for this block, you're going to get the digital pattern files for to make that block in three sizes, either a 9x9, a 12x12, or a 15x15. And that's the 15x15. You're also going to get two additional segment pieces so that you can make the project, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, in these 15x15 sizes. So that's going to be the extra thing for the variation A that you need and the variation B, and then we'll put all the 15x15 squares together, and we're going to make a really great 45x45 wall hanging at the end of the month. And let me go ahead and show that to you right now. Here it is. So this is my quilt called Totality. It was created in honor of this year's total eclipse. So you can see we have the three blocks right here that are actually, let me see. I don't know that you can see what I'm pointing to. Here we go. These are the three primary blocks. These are the three variation A blocks that we did last week. And these are the three variation B blocks that we're going to do this week, okay? So this is Totality. It's a great wall hanging size, 45x45. It's also great, I think, as a baby quilt. It would also be great if you wanted a kind of just a decorative piece to lay across a rocker or a piece of furniture in your home, or like a medallion. I call these medallion quilts because they can just be centered out on a bed, and you can see them over the top of a beautiful bedspread or something like that. So that is Totality. And this week we're working on Layout B. You get all this information in your pattern set, and that's this block. So let's look at last week's block for a moment. This was variation A. It was very simple. We did 4 patches in the corner, so that was different from the original. In the original we had solid squares. We left the solid square in the center here, and we also continued to use, of course, our point blocks, because that's what gives us our star points. All right, so that was primary, and this is variation A. And I'll link these two videos at the end so that you can see them. And you'll be able to tell, you know, how this goes in progression and all. And you'll get to see all the little individual demos for making the segments. And at the end of this video today, I'll be adding on. So when I say goodbye, the video will continue, because we'll have the point block demonstration, half square triangle demonstration, and diamond in a square variation demos for you at the end. Okay, so let's look at this week's block, 5440 or Fight variation B. I love this one. This one goes back to our original two colors, just the yellow and the mint color. There was no other color in this one, unlike last week where we added a third color so that we can see, you can see here on the quilt, this third color in here is purple. I chose to use this white with that same purple in it. So I still kept that color, but I used a small print there. And so that 3, and then we're back to the mint and yellow here. Now, I talked about this last week. You can do any colors you want. That's not a problem, but you guys know how much I love these colors. So I wanted to just keep mine all in that range, but you can do whatever colors you want. All righty. Let's take that out. There we go. So here is our block. So again, we have our 4 points blocks for our 4 cardinal positions, north, south, east, and west. But in the center this time, we're going to be doing the diamond in a square. And then in our corners, we're again going to be doing 4 patches, but we're going to be doing 4 patches that are made out of half square triangles instead of last week we did the solid squares. So I will have a half square triangle video at the end, the diamond in a square, and I'll add in the point one too in case you have it. This is the first one you're starting with. But these are super simple to do. Now, next Sunday, there will be a much condensed quilt lab. It won't be the finished part of this because, as you all know, I'm taking part in a show for our local theater group. We're doing the musical Seussical. And so I won't be around to do the Sunday video this week. So there will be a smaller video on something just a little bit different, but it will, the week after that, we will finish this up. Okay. And we'll talk about quilting and stuff like that. But that is this week's block. Super simple. Now let's talk for a moment about these 4 patches with the half square triangles. I tried something a little bit different this time around. Sorry, my bangs are in my eyes. Don't ever decide to let your bangs grow out. Just be a solid bang person or a solid no bang person, because growing them out is driving me nuts. So what I did here is, you know, I always start with my lightest fabric. That way, when you flip the darker fabric, you don't get shadowing. These 2 fabrics are really about the same depth of color, even though they're different colors. They're that same level of color. So either way, I didn't get, no matter which I didn't get a shadow. So on some of them, I started out with my yellow, and some of them I started out with my mint. And I think by doing half of them starting with the yellow and half of them starting with the green, when I went to put everything together, it really, I think it really made this block lay a little bit flatter, a little bit easier. Now, we've done a Riley Blake block recently where I created a double half square triangle. I had this done before that, so there isn't, I didn't have an equivalent for this size. But for future, I might make a double half square triangle for things like this for the 4 patches, because you know what happens is when we do the double, there isn't that, there's not that extra seam. On the back of this one, there is that extra seam. Now, it's not a bad thing on this one because these squares are a little bit larger. But you having a double half square triangle might work out a little smoother. We'll get rid of one whole seam in each of the corners. So, you know, I'm always for getting rid of the seams. Simplify to beautify, right? So this is variation B. Now, variation B is actually a more common version than the primary version, but that is the primary version. And the version that you actually see most often for people who do this square is variation A, believe it or not. And I think variation A for me is my favorite of the 3. I really love them. Okay, everybody, very short video this week because I want to put the demos on and all for you. But to get your pattern set, you'll go to our website, sewincommon.com. If you have any questions at all, you can, of course, contact me at support@sewincommon.com. And please, again, if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe. Whoops. hang on, got my thing choose wrong. There we go. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. Just take your little mouse over to the little button, click subscribe, because we'd love to have you as part of the So Uncommon family for sure. And please do me a huge favor, whether you subscribe or not, and I hope you do, please like and share the videos. It's really helpful for other folks to find us. And that's how this channel has grown, is because all of you have shared and liked our videos, okay? So I appreciate that so much. So until next time, everybody, remember what I always say. Quilters are artists in their own right. And so everything we put out in the world makes the world what? More beautiful. So go, so life beautiful, everybody. Until next week, bye for now. Okay, so here we are at my machine camera, and the first square block that we're going to create is the half square triangle. Now we're going to go through and make the half square, the quarter square, and the square in the hoop, and then we'll go back over under my other camera and we will talk about how we trim these, because you trim all blocks in that manner. So we'll do those all at once. You can see here I have my tools available, my scissors, my glue stick, my stylus if I need it, my seam roller, and my embroidery tape. And right here I have my two fabrics. So I've also loaded my file on my machine. On this particular machine, I loaded it through a USB stick. You might be able to load your files through the Wi-Fi if you have a more modern machine that can do that. So somehow you have loaded your file onto your machine and you should know how to complete that. Now today I'm going to be stitching in a black thread so that you can see it a little more easily. I have loaded my hoop with a standard wash away stabilizer, one that we would use for, say, making freestanding lace. So now I'm going to go to step one, which is basically going to give me what I call the border outline. And you'll find that information also written in the written instructions along with the step-by-step diagrams as well. So it is just stitching out my main border. And because we are doing a square, of course, that border is a square. And what it's showing us is that this finished box is going to be our finished size. Okay. When we trim it out, we'll talk about what else this box represents for us in the piecing process. Now, a half square triangle is always two pieces of fabric. I've chosen this yellow and this polka dot, this aqua with the light yellow polka dot. So I have those prepared. But the second step also gets stitched directly to your stabilizer, and it will give us the placement outline for our first piece of fabric, which is going to be our lighter color or our yellow fabric. So let's do that now. Now, I will give you one tip here, because this was something that my shop where I purchased my machines and I came across. I have another machine which is a embroidery only. It's not a combo machine like this one is. And I kept having problems with it not catching stitches on my straight stitch, which is basically the only stitch we use when we're piecing. And what we found out was that it actually needed a sewing bobbin case. So in this machine, because it's a combo, I have a bobbin case for embroidery and a bobbin case for sewing. The straight stitches do better if you use the sewing bobbin case rather than the embroidery bobbin case, because really all we're doing here is straight stitching like we would on a sewing machine. If you have an embroidery only machine, but that machine has a counterpart, which is a sewing machine or a combo machine, then get that sewing bobbin and check with your local dealer for all of that information if you have problems. That can be helpful. So here I'm going to take and use my glue stick. This will show you how to use that. And I'm just going to place a couple little marks right in my upper square or triangle, really, where I'm going to place my fabric. Now I can easily see and easily feel that thread line. So I'm going to lay this fabric so that I have roughly a 1/4 inch of it hanging over or coming past that line. Not a reason to get really worried about it if it's more, because you can always trim it later. Now I place that down. Now I'm ready to stitch out step 3, which is going to be the tack down of that triangle. Oops, I'm going to stop and lift my needle and my foot because my needle came unthreaded. So we'll just rethread real quick. Just a second. Sometimes that happens with machines, right? Thank goodness for auto threaders. There we go. Now we'll start again. And we're doing the tack down of the top half of the half square triangle. Very simple. The half square triangle is probably the most often used block in quilting. And so getting used to making this block will be helpful for you, because you're going to end up making a lot of them in your quilting journey. In fact, all 3 of the blocks in our basic set today are probably the 3 most often used blocks in the series, or in the quilting series. Alrighty, so now I've tacked that down. If, excuse me, this was way over this line, I could remove my hoop and I could take my scissors and I could just give it a little trim. If it's not straight, it doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. Another good reason to have scissors with a serrated edge, because you're going to get a really fine cut there. But as of course I've used my rotary blade with the pinking blade, I'm good to go. And I am not going to trim the outer edges, because that gets trimmed when we trim the whole thing out of the stabilizer at the end. So no need to trim here or here at this point. So now the next thing I'm going to do is lay down my second fabric. But I should tell you that with piecing in the hoop, your first piece of fabric is always laid down right side up. You also get that information in the written instructions. So if this piece were going to be the print, say that was my first piece, I would lay it down right side up every time, no matter what. Now, with a second, third, fourth, or subsequent piece of fabric, you always lay it down right side down or right side together with your other fabric. Now, if you can see here, I've laid this down, and you'll see it in the picture diagram in the written instructions, where just a tiny bit of my other fabric is showing. I like to make sure and do that. Then I know this is placed exactly where I need it to be for a good seam. Now I'm going to place that in here. I'm going to bring my needle down and my foot down, and I'm going to do the step 4, which is going to stitch this together on top of piece number 1. Alrighty. Now, piece number 5, or step number 5, is what we call the flip and stitch. So we're not done, obviously. We have to get this to be like this. So what I like to do there, again, is take my glue stick, give myself a little bit right in that square. And I always put my glue right on my stabilizer if possible, because then I know exactly where my boundaries are for that, and I'm not putting it out here anywhere. Now I'm going to take this bottom piece of fabric and I'm going to flip it. So easy. Now it's stuck there because of the glue. Now I can take my seam roller and I can roll my seam and give it a nice little kind of a press there to get it nice and flat. Now, eventually you're going to iron these as well, but that helps for the stitch out process. Now, step number 5 is to stitch this on its outer border so that it's stitched down. And you can go ahead and proceed with that. Golly, my needle came unthreaded again. Again, that's okay. That's what automatic threaders are for, to make it easy. There we go. Now we'll just go ahead and stitch out step number 5. And sometimes I just keep my fingers there and kind of help it. That's also a good time to kind of use your stylus, so not to get your fingers in there by the needle and the foot. So now technically we've stitched out our half square triangle. Congratulations, you did it if you've been sewing along with me. However, there's one more step. Step 6 will be a stitch out all the way around the block. And you might ask why. Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's going to connect these pieces that are right here at the corner between the two fabrics, or if I had multiple fabrics, it would connect them all the way around. And that box will also become our guide for trimming and our guide for sewing our squares together. You'll see that more in the trimming part of this video. So now I can, if I like, just use a stylus to hold this down here. The thing you're trying to prevent is to have your foot from catching here and flipping this back and causing problems. It's always fixable, but who wants to have to fix it if we don't need to? So you can use a stylus, or what I like to do is use my embroidery tape here. I don't put embroidery tape all the way around because it's not needed. I just put it over that point there, and then I know that that's not going to catch. Now you're going to say, oh, well, you're going to put it down there as well. I could, but because my foot is going to go around in a clockwise direction, it's not going to catch here because it's going over that fold. Here it would be coming against the fold. So you can put tape there or not. Let's go ahead and do that stitch out and I'll show you what I mean. So it's going to start up here in the corner and it's going to stitch in a clockwise direction. So I wouldn't want it to catch that. And see, it doesn't because it slides right over it because of the tape. Now, when it comes here, I don't have to worry because it's going with that fabric. It's not going to catch. Now, if it makes you a little nervous, just put a little piece of tape there until you're more confident. That's also fine. So then when we go over to trimming in a little bit, I will take this and I will peel this tape off, and then we will trim this out of the hoop. But congratulations, you just created your first half square triangle. That's how easy it is to create these squares in any size. This happens to be the 4-inch finish, but this could have been a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or any other size that you might happen to have. But in this set, we go up to 5 inches finished. So we'll talk about trimming in another part of the video. Let's move on to our quarter square triangle. Okay, everybody, here we are at the machine for the demo for what I call the point block. Like I said, some folks call this the V block. So you can call it what either way you want. We just call it the point block because it really comes to a sharp angle into a very specific point. And that kind of helps shape it actually into that kind of a geographic north, south, east, and west symbol that is used in older maps. So that is what we're going to demo in this one. And you can see this yellow is my fabric A, and my light aqua with the little white daisies, aren't they pretty, is fabric B. And so you can see here, I have my one large square and I have my two rectangles. Now, I have a pro tip for you. So before we get into doing this, I want to give you my pro tip. Here is one of the 5x5 blocks made, but it hasn't been trimmed out of the stabilizer. And like you guys know, I love to give you really generous fabric cuts. Some of you say, you know what, I always cut down your fabric by about 1/2 inch, Diana, because you give us so much. That's fine by me. If you've done Build a Quilt long enough and you feel comfortable doing that because you've made these segments plenty of times, go ahead and do that. But if you're new and you haven't done it before and you're not quite sure, then go ahead and use the information that I've given you, of course. And so for this 5x5 block, though, I gave you these extra big pieces for what becomes the sides here intentionally. So you might not want to cut down if you've used these for a while or done these for a while, because when you go to trim this all out, if you trim off this side and this side first and then do your top and bottom last, you will get enough fabric left over on these two sides to use that fabric in the sides of your 3x3 version. Here, can you see that? There you go. So that fabric can be used to create the sides for your 3x3 blocks. Now, you might say, well, I'm not going to make a 3x3 block now, so, you know, doesn't do me any good. Well, it could still, because the 3x3 block, if you've done a little calculating in your head, can be divided into, when we use the 5x5, it makes a 15x15 inch block. These 3x3s divide into that 15, and it makes the perfect size for making borders for those 15x15s. So you might not want to make the smaller block to start, but it would be perfect for a border block. And then I'm just going to trim this out. And yes, I'll have little pieces left over still, which, you know, is going to go in my scrap bin for my mosaic pieces. And I've got some mosaics coming for us still this year. Actually, I have a set coming, so I think you'll all like that. That mosaics for the tulips in March got a real welcome from you all, so we'll be doing more of those for sure. So that's my pro tip. Use that leftover side material from your 5x5 to make the sides of your 3x3. Now, if you're only going to be making 3x3 blocks, then of course use whatever the pattern tells you to cut. That'll work out the best. But this is the one we're going to demo, the 5x5 point block, or as I said, some people call that a V block. So what I've done already, let me take this out, is I have stitched down machine step 1 and machine step 2 directly on my stabilizer. This is our boundary box, and this is our placement block for our first piece of fabric. And while we have this here out of the machine, let's just go ahead and put a little glue stick on there. There we go. And place our fabric A, color A, which for me is this beautiful yellow. Doesn't that just say spring? It's just like, wow, pop there. I love it. I love these. I didn't remember that I had this fabric. Do you guys do that? Do you get to a point where sometimes you don't remember? Now we're going to do step 3, that you don't have fabric. I do that all the time, but I have a lot of this. And so I think this is going to end up being some of the main fabric that I use for our project that we're doing this month. So we're going to stitch out this. Now, what do you do with the side material for the yellow? Well, this is what we're going to trim off. You might have enough if you want to reverse your two colors and do dark here and light here. You could probably get away with these pieces on your 3x3 sides as well. Otherwise, that fabric, that needs to go in your scrap bucket for your mosaics. Now we're going to take this out. I'm going to turn it sideways because now I'm going to trim on each of my interior sides. So I don't need to trim across the bottom. I do not trim across the top because those get trimmed out at the end when we cut out the full block from the stabilizer like we see here. But I'm just going to trim out right here and here. Roughly, best guess, 1/4 inch. It's a little bit more, a little bit less. That's not going to be a problem because our seams are built in. So that piece, if you wanted to use it as a side piece for a 3x3, I suspect you'd have enough. What I might do is come in here and maybe cut this right about there so it's not flopping everywhere. But I think that might get away with the 3x3. Let me take a look. Let's bring our 3x3 in here. So there's my line. If I were gonna, well, you guys, you might be able to get away with that for a 3x3. It would fit. It might, you'd need to watch it carefully, but I think that could work for the 3x3 as well if you were going to do your reverse colors. You know, I'm always looking, even though I give you those generous cuts, I'm always looking for a way for us to be frugal with our fabric. And that's why I don't throw away pieces that are that size, because something like that, I can find lots of ways to use that. All right, so here we are. We've got our piece cut down. Now we're going to place our first piece right here of our side. Want to make sure when you lay it down that you've got it over your boundary at the top and the bottom, which I do, and then it's just laid even, right sides together at this point. Because what happens on second and subsequent pieces, fabrics are always right side together. Now we'll stitch that down, and while that's getting started, I'm going to run my glue stick right there. I find myself doing that all the time. While it's doing its little locking stitch, I just run my glue stick there if I can get away with it. Okay, now we're going to flip our fabric. And stitch this down. Oh, my allergies. I just feel like I'm drowning these days. And I've started getting pollen reports from the pollen service too. I kind of like to know at the beginning of my day, you know, what's coming my way in terms of sneezing and scratchy eyes and runny noses. And so it's been bad. The trees right now are what's causing all the havoc. There we go. Okay, now we've laid our second piece down and we're going to stitch that down. So is everybody ready for tomorrow's eclipse? Now, where we're at, we are going to get what they call a deep partial eclipse. We are not completely in totality. We're like at 96% totality. Good enough for me. I've actually seen a couple of full-on total eclipses, and 96% to me works just fine. 96 is still an A in my book. So I love it. I can't wait. I've got my glasses. I've got a little tripod set up for my phone so I can film it. We gave glasses to everybody who works for Dave and his group at work. They're all going to go out and watch it together at work. I just find it super exciting. And what I find exciting, and what you all, we're going to put our tape here. Now we need to put tape here and here because the foot could catch on these pieces. It's not going to catch up here. In fact, I like to, on this one, I like to take it out and lay it on a flat surface to really get this laid down. And remember, our pro tip is to put that tape outside of the line. Don't put it over the line, because then even though this type of tape peels out easily, there's still a little bit that you've got to work out and stuff. So just put it outside that line and you won't have to worry about that. And then I'm going to put a piece right here. And that's all I need for this one. So yes, I am all set up for Monday. Cannot wait. So the thing that I find interesting, and that I was reminded of by NASA, is that once you've kind of seen as much of the eclipse, you've got about 4 minutes. During that time, turn around and look at the sky that's away from the sun, because it's going to be dark as if it were nighttime, and you get to see stars technically during the day that are always there, but we don't get to see them because it's sunny out. We don't see those stars at nighttime until in the fall, when we're kind of in a different astronomical position. And so I can't wait to turn around and look at the planets and the stars that are out technically during the day. I think that is almost as cool as watching the sun. So yeah, I'm excited. I would have a whole party if I had enough people in my life that were as interested as I was. I'd have a whole party of them. All right, everybody, that is our block all nice and done. You're going to make 4 of those. You're going to trim it out 1/4 inch using your ruler. Lay your 1/4 inch mark right on your line here. 1/4 inch on all sides. You can use a straight rotary cutter. You know, I like to use the pinking rotary cutter just because it takes out a wee bit of bulk from my seams. And any little bit of bulk I can get out of my seams in any kind of quilting technique is good for me. So that is how we make the point blocks for 54, 40, or flight. Thanks, you guys. And let's go on to the next part of the video. Okay, and here is our last demonstration for our last piece, our last segment piece, which is our diamond in a square. It is by far the one with the most steps. There are 12 steps, but again, they're all very simple, very easy. I've prepped my fabric, so I was told to cut 2 squares and then subcut those squares into triangles. I've done that, and I've cut my center square. Now, the one nice thing about the diamond in a square is if I want to create different patterns, I can do 3 in one color and a 4th in another color, and that can start joining things together and modifying things. There's so much that you can do with this. This is also a really nice block if you're doing a friendship quilt and you want to do a light fabric as the center diamond, and then put your name and a date or anything like that in the center. Now, as I said, this has 12 steps to it. There are 3 full pages of step-by-step instructions, and we're going to walk through them right now. And the very first step says stitch out machine step 1 directly on your stabilizer, just like we did with our other 2. And we're going to do that also with step 2 in this one. We're going to stitch it out on the stabilizer as well, because it gives us a placement for our diamond fabric, which is our larger square piece here. Okay, there's step 1, nice and finished, so we know how big our block is going to be. Now we're going to do a step 2 stitch out directly on the stabilizer. And if you're wondering, I am demonstrating the 5-inch size today in all 3 of our segments. However, this is the exact same pattern and you follow the exact same steps, whether you're doing the 3-inch, the 4-inch, or the 5-inch. Okay, I have a little bit of a concern with my thread here. I'm going to rethread. Yeah, for some reason it's giving me a little bit of a snag. We'll rethread there, and I'm just going to take a quick look. Whenever I rethread the top for something like that, I like to look also at my bobbin thread, and I had just changed my bobbin thread between segments, and so it could be that I had not placed my bobbin in properly. So let's just redo that really quickly, just to make sure everything is right. Alrighty, so here is step 1 and step 2. And step 3 says place a fabric, I apologize. This is also part of step 2. Place a fabrics. No, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong instructions. I apologize again. This is step 3 we're on. Place a fabric A square over space 1, that's this space, and stitch machine step 3 and trim the excess on all 4 sides, remembering to leave enough fabric beyond the boundary lines at the top and the bottom and the sides. So we'll do that. So I'm going to put a little bit of my glue stick in my center. And I'm going to place, now you can place your fabric if you like on the diamond point like that, or you can place it like that. I think you get a better amount for cutting excess when you place it on the point, just like that. We'll slide this back in and we'll now do step 3. There, that looks better. And now we're going to trim this on all 4 sides, but remembering to leave fabric outside the outer boundary at the points. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring down our camera. And I'm going to start out here. And I'm going to trim this edge. And once I get beyond the boundary, I kind of see how it kind of curved off. That's going to make sure I have more than plenty of fabric beyond my point here. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to start way out here and then kind of come into my 1/4 inch. So I'm kind of doing this almost like a half moon when I cut this out, just because I want to make sure that I'm leaving myself plenty of fabric, because you can see when you cut your second side, you get a little, it gets a little small there. It's going to be plenty with the other fabric over it, but I want to make sure that I'm leaving plenty there. So I start out here and I kind of cut it like a half moon shape a little bit. There we go. And you can see that here. It starts out here, comes down, and comes back out of it. Now I have one more side to cut. And I'm going to do it the exact same way. Okay. So that leaves me with plenty of fabric. Even though it's a little bit, it's going to get covered with this fabric, and that's going to leave me plenty for trimming. Now, the next step goes on to page 2 and says, step 4, place a B fabric number 2 triangle right side down on top of fabric A as seen in diagram and stitch machine step 4. And that is going to be right here. This is, whoops, this is place 2. Let me put our camera back up there a little bit and place my first piece of fabric. So just like that, my fabric B, number 2 right here, it's going to flip up into that number 2 space, just like you see in your diagram. And I don't have to do any more trimming on this now until I take it out. It's just that first square that needs a little bit of trimming. Just put a wee bit of fabric glue there. Flip my fabric. Give it a little bit of a finger press. Now, the next step is to tack number 2 down, which is exactly what we're going to do. This is step 5 and machine step 5 as well. And we are just moving counterclockwise around our diamond. So next is to do the same thing in area 3, which is right below area 2. So I'm just going to take my next fabric and place it like so. And now machine step 6. And all of this is written out and diagrammed for you in the instructions. I'll bring it here so you can see it's in the instructions step by step. But once you've done the first one, you do all the other 3 corners the exact same way. Now we're at machine step 7. And even though this one has a lot more steps, it still only takes 3 minutes to stitch it out. Okay, now we're going to place number 4 here on this edge. So we're just coming over to the bottom left part of the diamond. And we're going to do machine step 8. And I'm just going to swipe a little glue there. And flip my fabric. And now we're at machine step 9. And that is our tack down for space number 4. And we're on page 3 of the Diamond in a Square instructions. And we're almost done. We're now to space number 5 and piece number 5. Okay, we're going to place that one just like this. And this is a really good segment to also show you why we do the boundary box at the end and we don't use the beginning placement box. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we go to trim these out. We'll hold that for trimming these out. We'll talk about that. Put my glue. I'm going to flip my, look what I did. I placed my fabric in the wrong direction. Bad me. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go back to step number 10. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to take my scissors and snip my thread right here, right where they're connected. And I'm going to snip it off and redo it because I placed my fabric going the wrong direction. I wasn't paying attention because I was talking to you guys. That happens. So remember, after your first piece of fabric, all other pieces of fabric must get placed right side down. So there we go. Now I'm right. And I'll come in here with a little bit of tape. And I'll just pull this excess out. There we go. See, even having to fix that just takes no time at all. Now I'm placing this right side down this time, and I'm back on step 10, which is the tack down, and I'm off to the races. Super simple. And yes, even I occasionally make a mistake, and I was talking with you all and put my fabric down going the wrong direction. But that was a super easy fix. Now I'm going to flip this. And we're going to stitch machine step 11. I think it might be time for me to change my needle. My needle is, do you hear that thunking a little bit when it goes up and down? That usually means it's time for a new needle. And I just finished a quilt and forgot to change it today. So probably need to do that. Now, and this one, I'm going to put tape in all 4 of my joining areas. To hold that fabric down. And so although your fabric is generous, when you look at it like this, you don't have much excess. You have plenty, but you don't have a lot of extra excess. So there is no wasting of fabric in this scenario. Now we're going to do machine step 12, and we're done with our diamond in a square. How simple was that? I'm a little concerned about that piece right there. There we go. Now, instead of using my finger, I could have used a stiletto or something to hold that down because you just don't want your finger getting in there and by chance getting stitched. I actually, after 55 plus years of sewing and quilting, I actually stitched my finger just this past year. It was not fun at all. Alrighty. Now we have our diamond in a square complete. Okay, now let's go over to my other camera and we're going to talk about how we trim these out of the stabilizer.